Imagine waking up one morning in Lagos, Nairobi, or Accra. You check the news. You hear that missiles are flying across the sky in the Middle East. Cities are on alert. Sirens are ringing. Countries are preparing for war. At first, you may think, why should I care? That war is very far away from Africa. But here is the surprising truth. A war thousands of kilometers away, between Iran, Israel, and the United States, could affect the price of food in your local market. It could affect the cost of transport in your city. It could even affect jobs and the economy in many African countries. So today we are going to ask a very important question. What does the war between Iran and Israel have to do with Africa? And why are many experts saying that Africans may feel the impact of this war, even though it is happening very far away? To understand this, we must first understand the war itself. Before we proceed, to stay informed and updated, subscribe to get more African stories from our lens. Also share this video to spread the news. Lastly, don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's start with what is happening right now. Recently, Iran launched hundreds of missiles toward Israel. Many of these missiles were powerful ballistic missiles designed to travel long distances at very high speed. Some reports say that more than 300 missiles were launched. Israel responded by activating its air defense systems. Some missiles were intercepted in the sky, but others still landed and caused damage. The situation quickly became very tense. The United States, which is a close ally of Israel, also became involved in the crisis. And suddenly, many people around the world began to worry that this conflict could grow into a much bigger war. But here is the important thing to understand. The conflict between Iran and Israel did not start today. It has been building for many years. Iran and Israel have been enemies for decades. Israel believes Iran is trying to build nuclear weapons. Iran says it wants power and security in the region and strongly opposes Israel's policies in the Middle East. Because of this, the two countries have been fighting what many experts call a shadow war. This means they do not always fight directly. Instead, they use cyber attacks, secret operations, political pressure, and sometimes military strikes through allies. But now, things appear to be moving closer to open confrontation. Missiles. Military threats. International tensions. When this happens, the whole world starts paying attention. But again, you may still be asking, what does this have to do with Africa? To answer that question, we need to talk about something very important. Oil. Oil is one of the most powerful resources in the world. It fuels cars, buses, airplanes, factories, and electricity generators. And a very large amount of the world's oil comes from the Middle East. Countries in that region produce and export millions of barrels of oil every single day. When peace exists in the Middle East, oil flows normally through global markets. But when war threatens that region, something happens almost immediately. Oil prices rise. And when oil prices rise, the whole world feels the impact. This includes Africa. Think about transport in many African cities. Many buses, taxis, and trucks run on fuel made from oil. When oil becomes expensive, transport becomes expensive. When transport becomes expensive, food prices often rise as well. Why? Because food must be transported from farms to markets. Fuel powers the trucks that carry rice, maize, vegetables, and other foods. If fuel costs more money, transporting food costs more money. And when transport costs increase, sellers increase prices. So the cost eventually reaches the ordinary person buying food in the market. This is why a war far away in the Middle East can slowly affect daily life in African cities. But oil is only one part of the story. There is another reason why Africa is paying attention to this conflict. Politics. Many African countries have relationships with different global powers. Some countries have strong partnerships with the United States. Some countries cooperate with Israel in technology, agriculture, and security. And some countries also maintain diplomatic and cultural ties with Iran. This means African governments must be careful. They do not want to choose sides in a conflict between powerful nations. Instead, many African leaders are calling for peace. The African Union has urged both sides to reduce tensions and avoid further violence. Many leaders say that global conflicts create economic problems for developing countries. And Africa, which is still building many of its economies, can be especially vulnerable. But governments are not the only ones reacting to this war. Ordinary Africans are also talking about it. Across social media platforms, many people are sharing their opinions. Some Africans strongly support Palestine and criticize Israel. Others support Israel and say the country has the right to defend itself. And many people simply say one thing. This is not Africa's war. Many Africans believe their countries already face enough challenges, unemployment, poverty, and development issues. They feel global powers should solve their own conflicts without dragging the rest of the world into economic trouble. But even if Africa does not want to be involved, global events still shape the world economy. And that means Africa cannot completely escape the consequences. History has shown this many times. For example, when major wars happen in one part of the world, food supply chains can be disrupted. When international trade routes become dangerous, shipping costs increase. When investors become nervous about global stability, they often move money away from developing markets. All these things can slow economic growth. And this is why experts across the world are watching the Iran-Israel conflict very closely. Because if it becomes bigger, the effects could spread far beyond the Middle East. But there is also another interesting side to this story. Some analysts say this conflict could actually change global alliances. And that could also affect Africa in unexpected ways. Over the past decade, many global powers have been trying to increase their influence in Africa. The United States has long been involved in economic and security partnerships. China has invested heavily in infrastructure across the continent. Russia has expanded military cooperation in some countries. And countries in the Middle East have also increased diplomatic and economic ties with African nations. So when a major conflict happens involving powerful countries, Africa often finds itself watching carefully. African leaders want to maintain relationships with many partners without becoming trapped in global rivalries. In other words, Africa prefers cooperation rather than confrontation. But the reality of global politics is that powerful nations sometimes compete for influence around the world. And Africa, with its growing population and expanding economies, is an important part of that global story. This means events happening far away can still shape Africa's future. So the question becomes: what should Africa learn from conflicts like this? Should African countries become more economically independent so global shocks do not hurt them as much? Should Africa invest more in its own energy resources? Should the continent focus on stronger trade within Africa so external conflicts have less impact? These are questions many economists and political analysts are now asking. Because while wars come and go, the lessons they leave behind can shape the future. For now, the Iran-Israel conflict continues to develop. Missiles have been fired. Diplomats are speaking. Global powers are watching. And millions of people across the world are hoping the situation does not grow into a larger war. Because when major powers fight, the effects rarely stay within one region. They spread across the global economy. They influence politics. And they touch the lives of ordinary people, even in places very far from the battlefield. Including Africa. And that is why this war matters more to Africans than many people might first think. But the story does not end here. In the next part of this discussion, we will look deeper into something even more interesting. How Africa's own energy future, trade systems, and political choices could determine whether global conflicts continue to affect the continent, or whether Africa can become stronger and more independent in the years ahead.